Hey there, guys. This is Controlled Fire from NA server here, coming at you guys with a Zieten guide video, review, or however you want to look at it. This ship is somewhat misunderstood. It's a unique ship in the fact that it's really situational. Okay, it's not a real versatile ship across all forms of matchmaking. You'll see really positive results in games where you don't have CVs, because just like any ship, I mean, CV kind of rules the field, so to speak, but it really hurts Zieten because it relies so much on its concealment. And that's the main thing that we need to talk about when we talk about Zieten. It's important. If you notice down here, the stat that we need to look at is the surface detection. Okay, it's at 8.67. Now, this is important because this ship lives and dies on ambushing its targets. It's super important to maintain your concealment and what we like to call jump scare people. So you want to utilize islands and cover in order to get closer to your targets inside of your detection range, and then jump them with your secondary guns. Because if you notice, you come up here to your secondary range and you've got 8 kilometers on your manual secondaries. Well, your concealment is 8.67 kilometers. So when you get into game, you want to try and wait as long as you can and get as close as you can to people before you make yourself known. Alright, now, the way I like to implement Zieten is start out very slow in the beginning of the game. You don't want to charge in to a position that you don't know what's there. You don't want to be spotted first. That's another thing that's extremely important with this line. If you're wanting to get the most out of this line, you have to control your fire. It's a nice little plug there on my name, but that's why I named myself Controlled Fire. I see too many players, random players, particularly battleship players, who just start shooting at the first thing they see. No matter what it is, a bot, a battleship across the map, whatever the case is. When you do that, you give away your position. And with a ship like this, the whole point is to surprise someone and ambush them. So if you give away your position by shooting your guns at 13 to 14 kilometers, you're not doing yourself any favors. So it's best to slow play the first minute and a half, 2 minutes even. Sometimes you may not fire your guns for almost 3 minutes even. But the nice thing about these German battle cruisers is that their damage output is so massive up close that you can afford to take 3 minutes to get into a position. You know, if you jump an unaware Kansas, for example, you can knock off 70,000 in a matter of about 45 seconds to a minute, really, if you jump them well enough and get your torpedoes involved and everything. So patience is key with this line, and knowing your armament ranges in relation to your concealment range is almost paramount with it. Now, let's go to the build here a little bit. Now, I do have what I would consider to be a fully tricked out Zieten here. I have the unique camouflage, which is, in my opinion, is super important for the ship because it gives you surface detection reduction here, where like historical camo, for example, isn't bad. It's not a bad camo. You get secondary range and you get torpedo range, which is actually a good stat to buff because your range is already 9.6 kilometers. So with an additional 4%, you're looking at 10 plus kilometer torp range on this ship. Now, it's neat, but it's not necessary. in my opinion, it's more important to get your surface detection down as low as possible in this particular line because of the way that it's meant to be played. You need to ambush things. So moving along from the camo, I'm also running a maxed out Lucians. Now, not everyone is going to have a level 15 maxed out Lucians, but I'm just trying to show what the capabilities are of the ship when he is, when it's fully decked out. This is my commander build. Just to give you a quick look at it. Pretty standard for the Schlieffen line. It's important to take frenziness. The level 14 skill, it's kind of insignificant, but it does help you stay alive. So, why not? Might as well take it. And then this one, Last Stand, super important for this line. Keeps you alive in a lot of situations. But, okay, further along here. Now, let's talk about how to approach engagements. Now, if you notice, this thing has a goofy layout. It's only 6 guns. It's not a lot of main battery firepower. Now, that being said, it has 406 millimeter guns. So, tier 9 guns at tier 8, although you get 6 of them, it's not great, but they hit hard when they hit. And it's important to use them in a range in which you can maximize their effectiveness, and that's not shooting at 12 kilometers or 13 kilometers. The 406s have amazing punch when you're 8 to 9 kilometers, and your accuracy isn't as big of a factor because you're closer. Now, if you try to get in a ranged duel with this thing, obviously it's going to go badly for you because it's just simply doesn't have enough guns, and the reload is too long, and the accuracy is just not good enough to take sustained ranged engagements. So, the layout, why it's important, we need to look at this. And this is why I've always said everyone wants to skip Zieten, but I am very adamant that it's important to, if you're interested in playing the Schlieffen line to its max potential, okay, it's important to learn how to implement the ship based on its layout. Now, obviously, the guns are more focused on the stern of the ship. Now, what's this mean? This means that, this means that on your engagements, you don't want to push head on into your engagements because your firepower is somewhat limited. What you need to do is orient your ship, position your ship so that you can reverse into engagements. And I have a gameplay video that I'm going to clip into this that highlights me doing this quite a bit. I really reverse into all engagements for the most part with both Zieten and Schlieffen, and I've got over 3,000 games played in Schlieffen with about a 75% win rate. Now, I don't have the best stats in it, but I think it's safe to say that I've, for the most part, figured out how to make Schlieffen work. And Zieten is no different. It's just a smaller Schlieffen. So, reversing into engagements keeps your torpedo tube angles to where you can use them. You can fire out torpedoes out the rear of your ship, and you can basically deny people. They're used for area denial, controlling your opponent's movements. That's, everybody always wonders what you can do with these really slow torps. They're really not meant for, this is crazy, but they're not meant to actually hit people. I mean, they are, but they're more for controlling your enemy's movements. So, for example, if you don't want them, say you're in a fight with someone, and you don't want them to be able to get behind an island and hide from you, for example, you would use your torpedoes to block that line of line of escape for them. So they have two choices. They can stay in the engagement with you and fight you, or they can, try to run, get behind the island, and hide and eat your torpedoes. This is how we implement the torps on this line. They're not a main source of your damage. Now, you can get a lot of torp hits, but it takes practice on learning how to use them because they're so slow. You basically have to use them as a net. Think of it like fishing. You're not throwing a topwater jig trying to catch a 10-pound largemouth, or for example, but you're casting out a seine net, for example, and you're trying to catch bait fish. It's the same thing. I mean, you're sending torps out in a spread hoping to get one or two hits that you wouldn't otherwise get. You're not going to be able to implement these torps in a manner like a DD would as a main source of damage is where I'm going with that. So you need to learn how to position so that you can reverse, whether that's you stop behind an island and then you reverse out away from the island and then you start your engagements that way, or you can you're pushing head on and you turn out to kite. That's important. This line is super squishy when you're comparing it to like a Kansas or a Bismarck or something that can hit you really hard. It's going to chunk you down really quick because they simply don't have the protection or the health pool to be able to take just straight battleship engagements back and forth. You have to be able to control the engagement is the way I like to look at it. You dictate what happens. You start the engagement, you disengage if you start to get low. If your health is getting lower, there's nothing wrong with turning out and kiting away from the situation and healing up. Going dark, that's another thing. Going dark is important. Realizing when you're in trouble, when you have 2 or 3 ships focusing you and you're getting crossfired from let's say from another cap, from another objective, and you're getting crossfired in the center. You don't want to sit in that situation. These aren't ships like a Tirpitz, like a Bismarck, that can take a lot of heavy sustained focus. So it's important that you stay aware of your surroundings, stay aware of your level of focus, and then of course position accordingly. Let's see, what else do we need to talk about with it here? Okay, overloads. One important thing with your overloads. You get 2 secondary overload 2s. Now, you want to use them sparingly because it is a main source of your damage. And what you should try to do is time your secondary overloads directly with your ambush. Like, say you can isolate a Bismarck, for example. You want to jump him and use your secondary overload at the same time. Don't try to use your secondary overload when you can't fully engage with an enemy because you're going to be wasting your damage output, so to speak. You'll gain experience through playing it and when you can use it to its full effect and when you can't. But that's one thing to remember, is to try and time your overloads with your engagements, with your pushes. Alright, so I think that pretty well covers the ship itself. Let's go to a little gameplay here. Hey guys, back here with the gameplay. I recorded 3 videos last night, and I wasn't able to get but one game that didn't have at least 2 bots in it. And I wanted to give the best representation of the ship that I could against real players. So, I apologize, there is one bot, Gneisenau, but this game was a pretty solid game, so I decided to just go ahead and use this one as the example. So, looking at the enemy lineup, you've got a pretty solid battleship lineup when you're in something like a Zieten. The Kansas has a heavy salvo. Massachusetts has a really heavy salvo. Roma, of course, is Roma. So we need to be careful. We're we're their prey. Zieten is pretty soft in comparison. So we'll go ahead and jump into the gameplay here, and I'll kind of walk through what I look for, at the beginning of the match, and as I make movements, I'll try to describe what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So when I spawn in, and I'm in something like Zieten, Schlieffen,
Gefechtsstation
type of ship, I look at where I spawn and I look at the minimap. Okay, so as we look at the minimap, I see that I'm on the left flank. Okay, if you want to divide it right down the center of B, I would be on the what you consider the left flank, A side. So my right flank is already pretty well covered. 2-3 battleships, however you want to look at it, and a cruiser. They really don't need any more help on that side. So I'm going to go over here and support my destroyer, because he's my eyes. That's one thing that Schlieffen and Zieten and the battlecruiser line, they pair really well with destroyers, because they have great concealment, so you can maximize the destroyers' effectiveness, because you can use them as a spotting tool, and then that allows you to get closer than you can in, say, a Bismarck, Tirpitz, even Vladivostok. Those type of ships. Their concealment is way too big. That they get detected from so far out that they can't sneak up on anything. So working with your destroyer in a Zieten and a Schlieffen, it really helps your gameplay out. So what can I do on the left side? So I'm looking at it and I see the island directly in front of me. It's a large island, plenty of cover, and it allows me to get close, very close, to both B and A without being detected. And I'll show you right here. This is how this works. So
Machen wir ihnen das Leben schwer.
Okay, that's a good example. We'll stop right here. The little white dotted line that's just at the edge of our secondary gun range is our detection ring. For those of you that don't know what that is or aren't aware that it exists, it's where your ship can be spotted. It's the distance away from something that before you are detected. So this is important to look at when you're using this line, when you're using a Zieten, Schlieffen, etc. It's important for all ships, destroyers, cruisers especially. But since we're on the Zieten topic, I'm going to try to stay focused on it. I'm going to use it as an example. So super important to watch your detection range when you're in a Zieten. You don't want to push too far up. Okay, so now look at where that dotted line is in relation to A and B. Now I can safely get to roughly halfway across, if you want to imagine where that dotted line is, roughly halfway across B before I ever have to worry about their destroyer or cruiser or anything spotting me. So this allows me to get behind that island pretty easily. And once I'm there, then you can stop and you can evaluate the battlefield, see where everybody's at. So we'll go ahead and jump into the play here.
Verstanden.
I'm just looking around. And one thing to make mention of is it's very important to slow play. Okay, slow play this line. Notice that I'm only going half speed. You don't want to go full speed, charge on into B, and then get spotted by everything and you get focused out. And that's what I see too many German battlecruiser captains doing. They just charge in and they're the first to die. Or they get crippled to the point where they're useless for the rest of the match. So slow play it, even if it's boring. To take some time.
Gegnerisches Team eroberte den Bereich.
Or they take patience before you get rewarded with the sheer output, the damage output that they're capable of. So, stop it right here. Now, looking at where I'm at, evaluate my targets here. I noticed that I've got the Bismarck coming across B. Okay, there's nothing that I can do about him at this moment, because if I were to take the engagement with Bismarck, I would be central, and then I would be crossfired from both A and C. Now, not a place you want to be right off the bat. So I choose to take the left side of this island because I know that I'm still, for one, I'm undetected. Nobody knows I'm here. And then two, we have a nice juicy cruiser, which is Zieten and Schlieffen. They will absolutely crush cruisers. That's partially what they're for, is to just wipe cruisers out. So, what a perfect opportunity. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Gegnerisches Team
Okay, now, I
eroberte
know
den
I
Bereich.
said that you need to reverse into engagements. In this instance,
Ziel
it's
penetriert.
not needed. It's not necessary because I have an island that I can utilize.
Volltreffer.
And it's not so important. I don't have to
Gute Arbeit.
run away from something. I can just back behind the island here. And then none of the things that are in A can shoot at me. Gotta love when your friendly battleships
Wir haben den Gegner
block the
getroffen.
torps. Thanks, bot. I don't
Unser
know if
Team
they hit
eroberte
anything,
den Bereich.
But they were definitely going towards the Massachusetts and the Gneisenau. Now, alright, back to the battle here. So, okay, I see that we only have one DD in the game, and he's almost dead. So, I'm going to go ahead and make the decision to reverse towards B, because there's nothing he's going to be able to do to me. Pretty safe going on. Now, I know that I've got all the battleship power on the left of me here. I can't take that engagement because they're all so close together. Now, what you got to look for in Zieten is ships that are isolated. Okay, so like I could choose to take on the Gneisenau, but that would put me broadside against the Kansas and the Bismarck. So what I choose to do here, look at, and notice that I'm reversing, like I was talking about earlier. I'm reversing into my engagement. And I notice that Massachusetts is isolating himself outside of B right there. So that's where I'm going to focus my attack at. Now, I've done these torps just kind of hoping that he would stop right there, and then I would be able to land some. They don't work out. That's how it goes sometimes, you know. Now, notice what I'm doing here. I'm orienting myself, positioning myself. It's a good one right here. I'm positioning myself so that I'm staying skinny. My stern is pointing at the Bismarck and at the Massachusetts. No, I'm sorry, whatever else is over there. Yeah, the other battleship. Point being, if I were to stay the way that I was, okay, and still attack the Massachusetts, then I would have been flat broadside to the Kansas. It's a Kansas and a Bismarck. Yeah. Anyway, so I choose to orient my ship so that I'm stern in to both the Bismarck and the Kansas. Now they don't have great shots on me, and now it's basically a 1v1 against Massachusetts at this point. So, like I was saying, the torpedoes.
Verbindlichsten Dank.
They're there to basically catch people sleeping. Second. Okay, so when you use an overload and you're close enough that you can accurately hit like the stern or the bow of a ship, then go ahead. It's safe to use AP against battleships, but when you're at this kind of range, when you're at like 7 kilometers, sometimes it's safe to switch to HE, and if you're just trying to get shells out and you're not super concerned with being able to aim accurately, because I'm also worried about the other ships that are around me at this moment. I've got 2 battleships behind me. I just need to stay aware, and I don't want to get so hyper focused on aiming that I start taking shells from other locations. Anyway, so I'm using HE just because it's a consistent damage amount. It's not the best, but it's going to produce consistent damage in this moment, and it's what I needed, because I know that I've got these torpedoes that are on their way that might catch him.
Gegnerisches Team eroberte den Bereich. Volltreffer.
So see, I torqued well ahead of him because I knew that he was going to be pushing that speed.
Wir haben die gegnerische Schiff zerstört.
They're so slow that you have to notice, you have to really be looking for where they're going.
Bestätigt, verstanden.
It's tough because any slight
Bereich
movement,
B erobern.
the enemy makes can
Jawohl,
totally make
jawohl.
you miss by a mile. So they take time to perfect, and really a lot of times it's just pure luck. I'm not even gonna lie. Now, I spoke about going dark earlier. Okay, now if you notice right now, my detection indicator just went away. That means, that Kansas just shot his salvo at me, but now they don't know where I'm at. So I make the choice right here to reverse into B. Having watched the video back now, I think the smarter play would have been to not reverse into B right here, but to utilize the island that's right in front of me and go ahead and push out there instead of backing up. But I wanted to make sure to secure B, because how many times, have we ignored an objective, ignored a cap, and then it turned around and bit us, and we lost the match on points. Even if we had a 130,000 point, damage game, you still lost because you didn't cap. Now, it's bit me in the butt so many times, I go ahead and make sure I cap when I can. So, going on.
Wir werden angegriffen.
While I heal here, and I'm dark, so that's important with this line. They're so stealthy. Just stop shooting. I don't have to shoot right now. I've got 2.5 minutes, roughly. I'm getting the cap, and then I'm going to go address the issues. But let yourself heal, give yourself time, and
Unser Team
they're
eroberte
wondering
den
where I'm
Bereich.
at. They don't know. I could be the left side of the island, I could be the right side of the island. So, what I'm doing here is I noticed that the Bismarck is going from right to left behind the island, obviously. Now, I know he's going to be pushing out because he doesn't know where I'm at. So, he doesn't know that he needs to be stopping right there, okay? So, I go ahead and I use my weak side. Now, what I call my weak side is all my guns are facing to the right. So, my weak side is going to be my left side. And so, I go ahead and I drop weak side torps out in where I think the Bismarck's going to go. And then, instead of going to the right side of the island right here, I double back on it, since my guns are already on the right side. There's no sense in swinging them all the way around to the left.
Verstanden.
It's
Jawohl.
easier to turn your ship. And then I'm also isolating myself in a 1v1 against the Bismarck and using the island to cover myself from the Kansas right here. Drop more torps in front of him. I get a couple hits.
Ziel getroffen. Gute Arbeit.
That's enough to swing.
Wir haben den Gegner getroffen. Wir sind getroffen. Ziel getroffen. Gute Arbeit. Wir haben den Gegner getroffen. Wir sind getroffen.
Now, since I turned out the left side,
Wir werden angegriffen.
good example of why it was important to do that. I sink the Bismarck. Now, look where I'm at already in relation to the Kansas. Right there. Now, if I had pulled flat out, if I had just stayed flat and turned left and went out from behind the island to fight the Bismarck, I would have been sitting just plain broadside to the Kansas. Now, you gotta be looking at your mini map at all times and you got to make sure that you're limiting your profile to other enemies, and that's what I see a lot of battleship captains struggle with, is not watching their crossfires, not watching their broadsides, etc. You know, the game is the match is three-dimensional. You're not always fighting what's directly in front of you. So you notice I'm stirring into the Kansas now. He doesn't really have much of a shot on me. You can see the shells fly over. Now, I spoke about kiting earlier. This is a perfect kiting example. I've gone stern in to the Kansas because that's where all of my secondaries can get in on the fight. Plus, I'm working with the rear of the ship, which the funny thing about the Zieten, the Schlieffen line, Prinz Ruprecht, and all of them, the hitbox, the way the hitbox works on the ship itself, makes it kind of tricky to hit when it's stern into you. Now, it's important to use that to your advantage because it's a good way to mitigate damage. If you sat bow in and 3/4 bow in, you're going to eat all those shells. When you're quartered away, when you're stern in or 3/4 stern in, however you want to look at it, quartered away is what I would call it. You can dodge shells. You can go forward. You can reverse. You can swing your stern left, right, etc. And the hitbox makes it so it's hard for the enemies to hit you. So it's another important reason to use your stern.
Unser Team gewinnt! Wir haben den Gegner
So pretty
getroffen!
much it's a wrap from here because it's not
Gute
really a good
Arbeit!
situation. At 6 kilometers. My team's obviously helping.
Volltreffer! Gute Arbeit! Volltreffer! Wir haben den Gegner getroffen! Ziel getroffen! Wir werden angegriffen! Wir haben den Gegner getroffen! Volltreffer! Unser Team gewinnt!
So I ended with 116K. I mean, not a stellar game by any means. It's a solid game, but basically shows that the ship is very capable, but it just takes a lot of input to make it work. You can't really expect to draw a lot of fire in it. You're not going to be the guy that's sitting in the middle of the cap, just dominating everything, and people shooting you, and you're just able to sustain it, like an Atlantico, for example. You can't do that. So you got to play it as such, and if you do it right, it can work out. I have a fairly good win rate with it. It's not amazing. It's far from my best ship. That's definitely for sure. And my average damage in Zieten is okay. It's not great, but it's a ship that I think is important to learn how to play, and so I hope this helps. If there's any further questions, I mean, I'm really terrible at explaining things, but I'm willing to try. I've got a few thousand games and played in this line, and I mean, you got to learn something from that much gameplay. So anyway, I hope this helps. I appreciate your patience in watching it, and have a good evening. Thanks.